The sun beat down mercilessly on the endless stretch of prairie grass as Willa Morgan stumbled forward, her vision blurring at the edges while her cracked lips moved in silent prayer for water she did not have. The year was 1878, and she had been walking for 3 days straight across the New Mexico territory, fleeing from a stagecoach robbery that had left her stranded 50 miles from anywhere civilized, with nothing but the clothes on her back and determination that was rapidly crumbling beneath the weight of dehydration and exhaustion. Her burgundy traveling dress, once pristine when she had boarded that ill-fated stage in Santa Fe, now hung heavy with dust and sweat, the fabric clinging to her trembling legs as she forced one foot in front of the other across the unforgiving landscape that stretched endlessly toward a horizon shimmering with heat. She had been traveling to Deeming to meet her aunt, the only family she had left after her parents succumbed to influenza the previous winter, leaving Willa alone in the world at 22 years old with nothing but a small inheritance and the address of a relative she had never met. The stagecoach was supposed to deliver her safely to her new life, but the bandits had other plans, taking everything of value from the passengers before riding off into the desert, leaving them all to fend for themselves. The driver and the other passengers had headed toward a mining camp they claimed was only 10 miles east, but Willa had insisted Deeming was closer to the south, and she had set off alone despite their warnings, convinced her sense of direction would see her through. She had been catastrophically wrong. Now, as the afternoon sun reached its peak, painting the sky a brutal shade of white-hot blue, Willa felt her knees buckle beneath her. She caught herself, hands hitting the dry earth, prairie grass scratching against her palms as she gasped for breath that seemed to burn her lungs. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, for water, for mercy from the relentless heat that pressed down on her like a physical weight. She tried to push herself back up, but her arms gave out, and she collapsed forward onto the sun-baked ground, her cheek pressing against the warm earth as darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. This is how I die, she thought distantly, alone on the prairie like a foolish girl who thought she knew better than experienced travelers. Her eyes drifted closed, tears she could not afford to shed burning behind her eyelids as consciousness began to slip away from her like water through her fingers. She did not hear the sound of hoofbeats approaching, did not feel the shadow that fell across her prone form as a rider pulled his horse to a sudden stop. What she did register, in the strange half-aware state between consciousness and oblivion, was the feeling of strong hands rolling her over gently, and a deep voice speaking words she could not quite make out. Cool water touched her lips, just a few drops, and she tried to gulp desperately at the source, but the water was pulled away. "Easy now," the voice said, clearer this time, and she felt herself being lifted as effortlessly as if she weighed nothing at all. "I have got you. You are safe now." Willa tried to open her eyes, tried to see who had found her in this vast emptiness, but the effort was too much. She felt herself being settled against something solid and warm, felt the rhythmic movement of a horse beneath her, and then the darkness claimed her completely. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. The rocking motion of riding, the solid warmth of a chest against her back, an arm wrapped securely around her waist, the sound of a male voice speaking in low, soothing tones, though whether to her or to the horse, she could not tell. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry and only a small, rasping sound emerged. "Do not try to talk," the voice said immediately, and she felt the motion stop as the rider pulled his horse to a halt. That arm around her waist shifted, and a canteen was brought to her lips again. "Small sips. I know you want to drink it all, but you will make yourself sick." Willa forced herself to obey, taking tiny sips of the sun-warmed water even though every instinct screamed at her to gulp it down. After a few moments, the canteen was withdrawn and she finally managed to open her eyes, squinting against the late afternoon sun. "There you are," the voice said, and Willa turned her head slightly to find herself looking up at a face that seemed carved from the landscape itself. All strong lines and sun-bronzed skin beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. Eyes the color of creek stones, gray-green and steady, looked down at her with concern. "Thought I had lost you there for a while. What in God's name are you doing out here alone, stagecoach?" Willa managed to croak out, her voice barely recognizable even to her own ears. "Robbed." "Trying to reach Deeming." The man's expression darkened. "When was this? 3 days ago, maybe 4. I lost count." He swore under his breath, though he kept his voice low. "You have been walking for 3 days without supplies. Woman, you are lucky to be alive." He adjusted his hold on her, settling her more securely against him. "Deeming is still a good 20 miles south. I am taking you to my ranch. It is only about 5 miles west of here. You need food and rest before you go anywhere else." Willa wanted to protest, wanted to insist she could manage, but the words would not come. The truth was she could barely keep her eyes open, and the thought of another 20 miles might as well have been 1,000. She felt herself nodding weakly, and the man made a sound of approval. "Smart woman, not arguing. I am Asher Hawthorne. I run cattle on the land between here and the Mimbers River. You are safe with me, miss." "Willa Morgan," she whispered, and then added, because her mother had raised her with manners even if her judgment had proven questionable, "Thank you for stopping." "Any decent man would have done the same," Asher said, though his voice held a rough edge that suggested he had perhaps seen evidence to the contrary in his years on the frontier. He urged his horse forward again, and Willa felt herself sinking back against his chest, too exhausted to maintain consciousness any longer. She drifted in and out of awareness during the ride, catching glimpses of the landscape changing around them, the endless prairie giving way to more varied terrain with clusters of mesquite and the occasional outcropping of rock. The sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink when she woke more fully, her head clearer though her body still felt like it had been trampled by a herd of cattle. "Almost there," Asher said when he noticed her stirring. "You can see the ranch just ahead." Willa followed his gaze and saw a collection of buildings emerging from the landscape. A main house built of adobe with a covered porch, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings scattered across what looked like a well-maintained property. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and she could see figures moving about in the yard, going about the evening chores. As they rode closer, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron as she peered toward them. She was middle-aged with silver threading through her dark hair, her face creased with the lines of someone who had spent a lifetime squinting into the sun and wind. "Asher Hawthorne, what have you got there?" She called out as they entered the yard, her voice carrying clear disapproval mixed with concern. "Found her collapsed on the eastern prairie, Rosa," Asher said, bringing his horse to a stop near the porch. "She was on the stagecoach that got robbed, been walking for 3 days. Rosa's expression transformed immediately from suspicion to maternal worry. "Dear Lord in heaven, bring her inside at once. Miguel, come help." An older man appeared from the direction of the barn, moving with the slightly stiff gait of someone whose joints had seen too many hard years. Together, he and Rosa helped as Asher carefully dismounted while still holding Willa, then passed her down into Miguel's waiting arms. The older man carried her into the house as if she weighed no more than a child, Rosa fussing ahead of them, clearing a path to a bedroom off the main living area. Put her on the bed there. Asher, fetch fresh water. Miguel, have Maria heat some broth. This poor girl looks half-starved. Willa wanted to protest that she was perfectly capable of walking, that they need not go to such trouble. But the moment Miguel laid her on the soft bed, every ounce of remaining strength seemed to drain from her body. She sank into the mattress with a small sound of relief, her eyes already drifting closed again. "No, you do not, young lady," Rosa said firmly but kindly, her work-roughened hand gently patting Willa's cheek. "Stay awake a bit longer. We need to get some water and food into you before you sleep properly." Over the next hour, Rosa and a younger woman named Maria, who Willa learned was Miguel's daughter and the ranch cook, tended to her with efficient kindness. They helped her out of her filthy dress and into a clean nightgown, sponged her face and hands with cool water, and coaxed her to take small sips of broth, followed by tiny bites of bread soaked in milk. Willa's stomach, shrunken from days without food, protested even this small amount, but Rosa was insistent. "Your body needs fuel," the older woman said, her tone brooking no argument. "You will eat what you can, rest, and then eat more. In a few days you will be right as rain." "I need to get to Deeming," Willa said, though the words lacked conviction. "My aunt is expecting me." "Your aunt will have to wait until you are fit to travel," Rosa replied. "Asher can ride into town tomorrow and send a telegraph to let her know you are safe. What is her name?" "Catherine Morgan." "She runs a boarding house there." Rosa nodded. "I know of her. Good woman, she will understand." She tucked the blankets around Willa with practiced hands. "Now you sleep. We will talk more in the morning." Willa wanted to stay awake, wanted to thank these strangers properly for their kindness, wanted to understand where she was and what would happen next. But her body had other plans, and she felt herself sinking into sleep before Rosa had even left the room. She slept deeply and without dreams, her body taking what it so desperately needed. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, painting golden squares on the rough-hewn wooden floor. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, panic fluttering in her chest as she registered the unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory returned, flooding back in pieces. The prairie, the collapse, the cowboy with gray-green eyes who had carried her to safety. Willa sat up slowly, testing her body's response. She was still weak, her muscles protesting the movement, but the crushing exhaustion had lifted somewhat. Her head felt clearer, and though her throat was still dry, the desperate, clawing thirst had been satisfied. She looked around the room more carefully now, taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings, the colorful woven rug on the floor, the washstand with a pitcher and basin in the corner. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her inspection. "Miss Morgan, are you awake?" Rosa's voice came through the wood. "Yes," Willa called, her voice still rough but stronger than it had been. Rosa entered carrying a tray laden with food. "Good. You slept the whole night and most of the morning. That is exactly what you needed." She set the tray on the small table beside the bed. "I brought eggs, biscuits, and some fruit preserves. Your stomach should be ready for more substantial food now." The smell of the food made Willa's mouth water, and she realized she was ravenously hungry. "Thank you. You have all been so kind. I do not know how to repay you." "Nonsense," Rosa said briskly, helping Willa arrange pillows so she could sit up comfortably. "We are not savages out here, no matter what people back east might think. When someone needs help, you help them. That is the way of things." She poured coffee from a pot on the tray, adding cream without asking. "Asher rode into Deeming at first light. He will send that telegraph to your aunt and let the sheriff know about the stagecoach robbery. Probably too late to catch the bandits now, but the law should know." Willa accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Mr. Hawthorne seems very kind. Is he your son? Rosa laughed, the sound rich and warm. No, child, I am the housekeeper here. Have been for near about 8 years now, since Asher's parents passed and he took over running the ranch. Miguel is my husband. He manages the livestock, and our daughter Maria does the cooking. Asher also employs several ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse. It is a good situation for all of us. So Mr. Hawthorne runs this ranch alone. He does. Took it over when he was only 20 years old after his parents died of cholera. That was 8 years ago. He has built it up into one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory. Works harder than any 3 men I have ever known. Rosa's voice held obvious affection and respect. He is a good man, Miss Morgan. Honest and decent, which is more than can be said for a lot of men out here. Willa nodded, filing this information away as she began to eat. The food was delicious, and she had to force herself to eat slowly, remembering Rosa's warning from the night before about making herself sick. Between bites, she asked, "How far did he say Deeming was from here?" "About 25 miles by the main road." "You were heading in the right direction, but you would never have made it on foot without supplies. The prairie is unforgiving, especially this time of year." Rosa's expression grew serious. "You are very lucky Asher found you when he did. He was checking on some strays that had wandered from the main herd. If he had not chosen that particular route, well." She did not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. A chill ran through Willa despite the warm room. She had come so close to dying alone in that vast emptiness. Her bones left to bleach in the sun, her aunt never knowing what had become of her. The reality of her near-death experience settled over her like a heavy blanket, and she found herself blinking back tears. Rosa noticed immediately and reached over to pat her hand. "But he did find you, and you are safe now. That is what matters. You can stay here as long as you need to recover your strength before continuing to Deeming." "I could not impose," Willa said, though the words were automatic, years of proper upbringing speaking through her exhaustion. "You have already done so much. It is no imposition. We have the room, and I welcome the female company. Maria is a sweet girl, but she is only 17 and more interested in giggling about boys than having real conversation. It will be nice to have another woman around closer to my own generation." Rosa stood, collecting the empty dishes. "Now, there is a dress of Maria's that should fit you well enough until we can clean your own things. I will bring it in, and you can get up and move around a bit if you feel strong enough. Gentle movement will help your recovery." Over the next few days, Willa slowly regained her strength under Rosa's watchful care and Maria's excellent cooking. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, waking to the sound of the hands heading out to work the cattle, spending her days reading books from Asher's surprisingly extensive library, or helping Rosa with light household tasks, despite the older woman's protests that she was still a guest. Asher himself was a constant but distant presence. He returned from Deeming that first day with news that he had sent the telegraph to her aunt, who had replied with relief and gratitude, urging Willa to stay at the ranch as long as necessary to recover. The sheriff had indeed confirmed that the stagecoach robbery was being investigated, though the bandits had a considerable head start. 3 other passengers had made it to the mining camp and reported the same story Willa had told. After delivering this news, Asher seemed to go out of his way to give Willa space. She saw him at mealtimes, where he was polite but reserved, asking after her health but offering little else in the way of conversation. He spent his days working the ranch, often leaving before dawn and returning after sunset, his clothes dusty and his face weary but his eyes alert. Willa found herself watching for him, noticing when he rode in from the range, observing the easy way he handled his horse and the respect with which his ranch hands treated him. He was younger than she had initially realized, probably only 28 or 29, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone much older. There was a quiet competence about him that she found compelling, a sense that here was a man who could handle whatever challenges the frontier threw at him. On the fourth day of her stay, Willa was sitting on the porch in the late afternoon, a book open in her lap though she was not really reading, when Asher rode up alone. He dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on his feet, and seemed surprised to see her there. "Miss Morgan," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting, "you are looking much improved." "I feel much better, thanks to the care I have received here," Willa said. She set her book aside and stood, walking to the porch railing. "I wanted to thank you properly, Mr. Hawthorne. Rosa told me that if you had not happened to be checking on strays in that particular area, I would have died out there. You saved my life." Asher looked uncomfortable with the gratitude, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Like I said before, any decent person would have done the same." "Perhaps," Willa said, "but you were the one who did it. You carried me miles to safety, arranged for my aunt to be notified, opened your home to a complete stranger. That goes beyond simple decency. That is genuine kindness, and I am more grateful than I can properly express." He met her eyes then, really looked at her for the first time since that initial ride, and Willa felt something shift in the air between them. His expression softened slightly, and the corner of his mouth quirked up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You are welcome, Miss Morgan." "I am glad I was in the right place at the right time." He paused, then added, "Rosa tells me you have been helping around the house. You do not need to do that. You are a guest here." "I cannot sit idle when there is work to be done," Willa said. "It is not in my nature. Besides, it helps pass the time and makes me feel less like a burden." "You are not a burden," Asher said firmly, "but I understand the need to keep busy. This ranch does not allow for much idleness." He glanced toward the barn where Miguel was calling for him. "I should go. We have a fence that needs mending before dark. Will you be joining us for supper, if I am invited?" "You are always invited," Asher said, and this time there was definitely a smile, small but genuine. "Rosa would have my hide if I suggested otherwise." He tipped his hat again and strode off toward the barn, leaving Willa standing on the porch with a strange fluttering sensation in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent ordeal. That evening at supper, Willa found herself seated across from Asher at the long wooden table in the ranch house kitchen. Rosa, Miguel, Maria, and two of the ranch hands also joined them, the conversation flowing easily around stories of the day's work and good-natured teasing. Willa noticed that Asher was different here, relaxed in a way he had not been during their brief previous encounters. He joked with the ranch hands, complimented Maria's cooking, and listened attentively when Miguel raised concerns about one of the water sources running low. "Miss Morgan," one of the ranch hands, a young man named Charlie, said during a lull in the conversation, "Rosa tells us you are from Santa Fe. What brings you to our neck of the territory?" "Family," Willa said simply. "My aunt runs a boarding house in Deeming. With my parents gone, she is all I have left." "I am sorry for your loss," Charlie said, and the others around the table murmured their agreement. "Thank you. It has been difficult, but I am looking forward to starting fresh in Deeming, helping my aunt with the boarding house." "Catherine Morgan's place?" Miguel asked. "I know it. She runs a tight ship, that one. You will do well there." Asher had been quiet during this exchange, but Willa noticed he was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. When their eyes met, he looked away quickly, turning his attention back to his food, After supper, as Rosa and Maria cleared the dishes, Willa offered to help, but Rosa shooed her away. "You go get some air. You have been cooped up inside too much. A walk before bed would do you good." Willa stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the cool evening air. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in deep purples and blues, the first stars beginning to appear. She could hear the distant sounds of cattle lowing and the closer sound of horses moving in the corral. The air smelled of dust and sage and wood smoke, so different from the city smells of Santa Fe. She was so absorbed in the view that she did not hear anyone approach until a voice spoke from behind her. "Beautiful, is it not?" Willa turned to find Asher standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "It is," she agreed. "I have never seen so many stars. In Santa Fe, there are too many lights." "One of the few advantages of being in the middle of nowhere," Asher said with dry humor. He stepped out onto the porch, moving to lean against the railing a few feet from her. "Though I admit there are times I would trade some of this peace and quiet for the convenience of having a town nearby. Do you ever get lonely out here?" The question slipped out before Willa could stop it, and she immediately regretted its forwardness. "Forgive me, that was too personal." But Asher did not seem offended. He considered the question carefully before answering. "Sometimes. Mostly in the winter when the work slows down and there is too much time to think. But I have Rosa and Miguel in the hands, and the work keeps me busy enough that I do not dwell on it much." He glanced at her. "What about you? You must have left friends behind in Santa Fe." "A few," Willa admitted. "But after my parents died, everything felt different there. The friends I had were mostly married now, starting their own families. I felt like I was standing still while everyone else moved forward. Coming to Deeming, helping my aunt, it feels like a chance to start moving again." Asher nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling. When my parents died, I had offers from relatives to sell the ranch and come live with them back in Texas. But this place, it is in my blood. My father built it from nothing and I could not let it go, so I stayed, even though it meant being alone." "You are not alone, though," Willa said softly. "You have people who clearly care about you. Rosa speaks of you like a son. Miguel respects you. Your hands are loyal. That is more than many people have. I suppose that is true." Asher was quiet for a moment, then said, "May I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you leave the other passengers after the robbery? Rosa said you told them you would head to Deeming alone. That was incredibly dangerous." Willa sighed, embarrassment coloring her cheeks even in the growing darkness. "Pride, I suppose. Stubbornness. The other passengers were all men, and they kept talking about me like I was not there, deciding what I should do, where I should go. When they insisted the mining camp was closer and that I should go with them, something in me just refused. I was so tired of people making decisions for me, first after my parents died when everyone had opinions about what I should do, and then those men on the stagecoach, so I struck out on my own." She laughed bitterly. "Nearly killed me, but at least it was my own choice." "I can respect that," Asher said, surprising her. "The need to make your own decisions, control your own fate, that is important, but there is a difference between independence and recklessness. You can be strong and still accept help when you need it." "I am learning that," Willa said quietly. "Being here has taught me that accepting kindness is not the same as being weak." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars grow brighter as the last light faded from the sky. Finally, Asher straightened, settling his hat back on his head. "I should let you rest. You need to rebuild your strength." He hesitated, then added, "How much longer do you think before you are ready to travel to Deeming?" The question sent an unexpected pang through Willa's chest. Of course she needed to go to Deeming. That had always been the plan. But the thought of leaving this ranch, leaving these kind people, leaving Asher, filled her with a reluctance she had not anticipated. "A few more days, I think," she said. "I am much stronger now, but Rosa keeps insisting I need more rest." "Rosa is usually right about these things," Asher said. "But when you are ready, I will drive you into deeming myself. Make sure you arrive safely this time. You have already done so much, I could not ask that of you." "You are not asking, I am offering. After what happened with the stagecoach, I will feel better knowing you made it to your aunt's place safely." Before Willa could respond, he tipped his hat to her and headed off toward the bunkhouse, leaving her alone on the porch with her confused feelings and the vast, star-filled sky. Over the next week, Willa continued to recover her strength, but she also found reasons to delay her departure. First, it was a letter from her aunt saying she need not hurry, that she should take all the time she needed to fully recover. Then it was a rainstorm that made the roads temporarily impassable. Then it was Rosa mentioning that Maria could use help preparing preserves from the summer garden, a task that would take several days. Through it all, Willa grew more comfortable at the ranch and more aware of Asher. She noticed the way he rose before dawn each day, always the first one up and often the last to bed. She saw how he treated his animals with firm kindness, how he paid his workers fairly and listened to their concerns. She observed the way his face lit up when he talked about the ranch, the plans he had for expanding the herd, improving the grazing land, building a legacy. And she noticed the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, his gray-green eyes holding an expression that made her heart beat faster. For his part, Asher seemed to be finding more reasons to be around the house. He started taking his lunch there instead of out on the range. He began joining them on the porch in the evenings more regularly. He even asked Willa's opinion on which books from his library he should read next, leading to long conversations about literature and history and the world beyond the New Mexico territory. Rosa noticed, of course. Nothing happened on her ranch without Rosa noticing. One afternoon, while she and Willa were working on mending clothes, the older woman said casually, "He is falling for you, you know." Willa's hand stilled on the shirt she was hemming. "Who? Do not play coy with me, girl. Asher. I have known that boy for 8 years, and I have never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. He is smitten, whether he has admitted it to himself yet or not. Rosa, I am only a guest here. I will be leaving soon." "Will you, though?" Rosa asked, her dark eyes shrewd. "You have been saying that for over a week now, and yet you are still here. Not that I am complaining. I like having you around. But I think you are finding reasons to stay, same as Asher is finding reasons to be near you." Willa set down her mending, her hands twisting in her lap. "Even if what you say is true, what good would it do? I am expected in deeming. My aunt is counting on me. I cannot just abandon my responsibilities because I have developed feelings for a man I barely know." "Who says you barely know him?" "You have been living under the same roof for near 2 weeks now. You have seen him every day, talked with him, watched how he lives his life. That is more than most couples know about each other before they marry." Rosa reached over and patted Willa's hand. "I am not saying you should rush into anything. I am just saying do not run away from something good because you are afraid. You have been through a lot this past year. You deserve some happiness." That evening, Asher asked Willa if she would like to take a ride around the ranch. "If you are feeling up to it," he added quickly. "I thought you might like to see more of the property. We have a particularly beautiful spot near the river." Willa agreed, ignoring the knowing look Rosa gave her as they left. Asher saddled 2 horses, a gentle mare for Willa and his own sturdy gelding, and they rode out as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The ranch was even more impressive from horseback. Asher showed her the extent of his grazing land, pointing out the markers that indicated his property boundaries. He showed her the natural spring that provided water for the cattle, the small cemetery where his parents were buried, the spot where he hoped to build a larger barn in the next few years. It has been a dream of mine to make this one of the premier cattle operations in the territory, he told her as they paused on a rise overlooking the ranch buildings. My father started it, but I want to build on what he began. Make something that will last, that will mean something. It already means something, Willa said. You have created a place where people can work and live with dignity, where they are treated fairly. That matters more than the size of your herd or your property. Asher looked at her with surprise and something deeper, something that made Willa's breath catch. I never thought of it that way, but you are right. I have been so focused on expanding, on building something bigger, that I forgot what my father always said. Success is not measured in cattle or land, but in the lives you touch and the good you do. They continued riding, following the line of the Members River until they reached the spot Asher had mentioned. It was a small clearing where cottonwood trees grew thick along the riverbank, their leaves rustling in the evening breeze. The water ran clear and cool, and the setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. This is beautiful, Willa breathed, dismounting with Asher's help. Her legs were a bit shaky from the ride, but the exercise felt good after so many days of relative inactivity. I come here when I need to think, Asher said, tying the horses to a tree where they could drink from the river. It is peaceful, helps clear my head. They walked along the riverbank, close enough that their hands occasionally brushed, each touch sending sparks up Willa's arm. Finally, they settled on a fallen log, watching the water flow past and listening to the evening sounds of birds settling for the night. Willa, Asher said after a long silence, his voice tentative in a way she had never heard from him. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Her heart began to pound. All right. Are you really planning to leave, to go to Deeming? He turned to face her, his gray-green eyes intense. Or have you been finding reasons to stay, the way I have been finding reasons to keep you here? Willa's breath caught. Asher, I do not know what you mean. I think you do. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. I think you feel this too, whatever this is between us. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a couple of weeks. But Willa, I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I found you on that prairie. Not just because you needed help, but because there is something about you that draws me in. Your strength, your independence, the way you see the world. I find myself looking forward to meals just so I can hear your voice. I lie awake at night thinking about you sleeping in the house, so close and yet so far away. Tell me I am not imagining this. Tell me you feel it too. Willa's eyes filled with tears, her throat tight with emotion. I do feel it, but Asher, I am so confused. I came here planning to start a new life in Deeming, to help my aunt, to build something stable after everything I lost. And now you are offering me something different, something I did not expect. I do not know what to do. Then do not do anything yet, Asher said, squeezing her hand. Stay a while longer. Get to know me better. Let me get to know you. We do not have to rush into any decisions. Just give us a chance. My aunt is expecting me. Send her another telegraph. Tell her you need more time to recover. It is not even a lie. You are still rebuilding your strength. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Please, Willa, I am not asking for forever right now. I am just asking for more time. Willa looked into his eyes and saw hope and vulnerability there, emotions she suspected this strong, capable man did not often show. She thought about her aunt waiting in Deeming, about the life she had planned. but she also thought about the life that might be possible here, on this ranch, with this man who had literally carried her to safety, and then shown her what kindness and strength looked like when combined in one person. "More time," she heard herself say. "I will stay longer. Give us a chance to figure out what this is." The smile that broke across Asher's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like coming home. Willa rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart, and felt some of the tension she had been carrying since her parents died finally begin to ease. They stayed by the river until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing, learning the contours of each other's thoughts and dreams. Asher told her about growing up on the ranch, about the loneliness of losing his parents so young, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. Willa told him about her childhood in Santa Fe, about the devastating winter that took her parents, about the fear and uncertainty that had driven her toward deeming. "I felt so lost," she admitted as they finally rode back toward the ranch house, the moon lighting their way. "Like I was drifting without anchor. Coming here, being on your ranch, it is the first time since they died that I have felt steady again." "You are not lost anymore," Asher said firmly. "Whatever happens between us, whatever you decide about your future, you are not lost. You are strong and capable and brave, even when you do not feel like it. Walking across that prairie alone, that was foolish, yes, but it was also incredibly courageous. You were taking control of your life, making your own choices. That matters." When they reached the house, Rosa was waiting on the porch, a lantern in her hand. She took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. "About time," was all she said, but her approval was clear. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness Willa had not thought possible. She and Asher spent every available moment together, riding across the ranch, talking for hours on the porch, sharing meals and stories, and slowly, carefully, building something real between them. Asher taught her to rope cattle, laughing when her first attempt sent the lasso flying in completely wrong directions. Willa read to him in the evenings from his books, her voice bringing stories to life in a way, he said, made him see them differently. They also kissed for the first time, a week after that evening by the river. It happened on the porch during one of their evening conversations, the words trailing off as they looked at each other, the attraction that had been building finally reaching a point that could not be ignored. Asher leaned in slowly, giving Willa every opportunity to pull away, but she met him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. "I am falling in love with you," Asher whispered against her lips when they finally broke apart. "I know it is soon, but it is true. You have changed everything for me, Willa." "I am falling in love with you too," Willa whispered back, her heart full. "I did not expect this. I did not plan for this, but I cannot imagine leaving now. I cannot imagine a future without you in it." But reality had a way of intruding on even the happiest moments. 3 weeks after Willa's arrival at the ranch, a rider came from Deeming with a letter from her aunt. Willa read it with growing dismay. "She is ill," Willa told Asher, her voice shaking. "A bad fever. She says she is recovering, but she needs help with the boarding house. There are guests booked for the next several weeks, and she cannot manage alone." Asher's face fell, but he nodded. "Then you need to go to her. She is your family and she needs you. But I do not want to leave you. We have only just found each other." Tears spilled down Willa's cheeks. Asher pulled her close, his arms tight around her. "I know. I do not want you to go either, but this does not have to be the end for us. Deeming is only 25 miles away. I can visit. You can visit here. We can make it work. What if we cannot? What if the distance is too much?" Willa pulled back to look at him. What if we lose this? We will not lose it, Asher said fiercely. I will not let that happen. Willa, I love you. That is not going to change because of a few miles between us. We will figure this out together. Willa wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at her heart. She had lost so much already. The thought of losing Asher too was almost unbearable. 2 days later, Asher drove Willa to Deeming in the wagon, her few possessions packed carefully beside her. The journey that had nearly killed her a month ago passed easily with Asher beside her, the two of them talking quietly about plans and possibilities, both trying to ignore the looming goodbye. Deeming was a bustling town, larger than Willa had expected, with a main street lined with businesses and homes spreading out in all directions. Catherine Morgan's boarding house was a large, well-maintained building near the center of town, freshly painted and with a welcoming front porch. Aunt Catherine herself opened the door when they knocked, and Willa saw immediately where she got her own stubborn independence. Catherine was a tall, spare woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked Willa over thoroughly before pulling her into a fierce hug. "You look just like your mother," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so glad you made it safely. When I got that first telegraph saying you had been in a stagecoach robbery, I nearly rode out to find you myself." "I am fine now, thanks to Mr. Hawthorne," Willa said, stepping back and gesturing to Asher, who stood holding her bag, looking slightly uncomfortable. Catherine turned her appraising gaze on him, and Willa watched her aunt take in every detail of Asher's appearance, his bearing, the way he looked at Willa. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her, because she smiled and extended her hand. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," Catherine said. "Thank you for taking care of my niece." "It was my honor," Asher said, shaking her hand. He turned to Willa, his eyes holding all the things he could not say in front of her aunt. "I will come see you soon. We will figure this out." Willa nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched as he climbed back into the wagon and drove away, her heart feeling like it was being pulled in 2 directions at once. Catherine, observant as ever, put an arm around Willa's shoulders. "Come inside. You can tell me about the cowboy who looks at you like you hung the moon while we get you settled." Willa threw herself into helping her aunt over the next few weeks, learning the ins and outs of running a boarding house. There were meals to plan and prepare, rooms to clean, linens to wash, and guests to accommodate. The work was constant but satisfying, and Catherine proved to be excellent company, sharp-witted and kind in equal measure. But Willa missed Asher with an ache that surprised her with its intensity. She missed the ranch, missed Rosa's cooking and Miguel's quiet wisdom, missed the vast openness of the prairie. Most of all, she missed Asher, missed his steady presence, his thoughtful conversation, the way he made her feel safe and valued and loved. He came to visit every Sunday, riding in early and spending the day with her, before heading back to the ranch in the evening. They walked around Deeming together, had lunch at the hotel restaurant, and spent hours sitting on Catherine's porch talking about their weeks apart. The visits were wonderful but also painful, each goodbye a fresh wound. "This is not sustainable," Willa said during one of these visits, 2 months after she had moved to Deeming. They were walking along the outskirts of town, and Willa felt the weight of their situation pressing down on her. "Asher, you are exhausted. You are working the ranch all week and then riding 50 miles round trip every Sunday to see me. You cannot keep doing this." "I can and I will," Asher said stubbornly. "I am not giving up on us. I am not asking you to give up. I am saying we need to find a better solution. This halfway existence is wearing on both of us." Asher stopped walking and turned to face her. "What are you saying? Do you want to end this?" "No, God, no." Willa grabbed his hands. "I am saying we need to make a decision." Either I come back to the ranch or you move here or we accept that this is not going to work. This limbo we are in, it is killing me. Your aunt needs you. My aunt is recovering well. The fever is long past. She is managing the boarding house fine with my help, but she was managing it before I came. She does not need me specifically. She just wanted to help me after I lost my parents. Willa took a deep breath. I think she would understand if I chose to go back to the ranch, to be with you. Hope and fear warred in Asher's expression. Are you sure? I do not want you to resent me for taking you away from your family. You would not be taking me away, I would be choosing you. There is a difference. Willa stepped closer, looking up into his eyes. I love you, Asher. I love the life we started building together on the ranch. I love the person I am when I am with you. I do not want to spend my life wondering what might have been if I had been brave enough to choose happiness. Marry me, Asher said suddenly, the words bursting out of him. Willa, marry me. Not because you feel obligated, not because of convenience, but because you want to build a life with me. I know I do not have much to offer except hard work and an isolated ranch and a heart that is completely yours, but if that is enough, then marry me. Tears streamed down Willa's face as she nodded. Yes, yes, of course yes, that is more than enough, that is everything. Asher let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he finally set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring all his love and relief and happiness into the kiss. I do not have a ring yet, he said when they finally broke apart. I will get you one, the finest one I can find. I do not need a fine ring, Willa said. I just need you. They went back to the boarding house hand in hand to tell Catherine, who took one look at their faces and started laughing. About time, she said, echoing Rosa's words from months ago. I have been waiting for you two to figure it out. I assume you will be moving back to the ranch. If you can spare me, Willa said hesitantly. I know you need help here. Catherine waved a hand dismissively. I managed this place for 20 years before you showed up. I will manage just fine. Besides, I have already hired a local girl to help out part-time. She starts next week. She pulled Willa into a hug. Your mother would be so happy to see you happy. That is all I want for you too. You will come to the wedding, Willa asked, and visit us at the ranch. Try and stop me, Catherine said firmly. Now, when is this wedding happening? And do not say it needs to be soon, because I need time to make you a proper dress. They decided on 6 weeks, enough time for Catherine to sew a dress and for Asher to make arrangements at the ranch. Word spread quickly through Deeming and the surrounding ranches, and what Willa had imagined would be a small, quiet ceremony grew into something larger, as neighbors and friends expressed their desire to celebrate. The wedding took place at the ranch on a perfect autumn day, the air crisp and clear, the cottonwoods along the river turning gold. Rosa had worked herself into a frenzy preparing food, and Miguel had decorated the barn for the reception. Chairs had been set up outdoors facing the river, and an itinerant preacher who traveled the circuit had agreed to perform the ceremony. Willa stood in the ranch house getting ready, Catherine fussing over the dress she had made, a beautiful cream-colored gown with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Maria had woven wildflowers into Willa's hair, and Rosa kept dabbing at her eyes with her apron. You look beautiful, Catherine said, stepping back to admire her work, like a queen. I feel like I might faint, Willa admitted, pressing a hand to her stomach. Is that normal? Completely normal, Rosa assured her, but you will be fine once you see Asher waiting for you. That boy has been pacing the barn all morning like a caged mountain lion. When it was time, Willa walked down the aisle between the chairs on her aunt's arm, her eyes finding Asher immediately. He stood near the river in his best suit, his hair neatly combed for once, his eyes locked on her with an expression of such love and wonder that any nervousness Willa felt melted away. This was right. This was where she belonged. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to stand together through whatever challenges the frontier threw at them, to build a life of honesty and respect and love. When the preacher finally pronounced them husband and wife, Asher kissed her with such enthusiasm that the assembled guests burst into applause and laughter. The reception that followed was joyous and loud, with more food than they could possibly eat and music from a fiddle player someone had hired from Deeming. Willa danced with Asher, with Miguel, with her aunt, with all the ranch hands, until her feet ached and her face hurt from smiling. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Asher took Willa's hand and led her away from the crowd, back to the spot by the river where he had first told her he was falling in love with her. "Thank you," he said, pulling her close in the growing darkness. "For what?" Willa asked, wrapping her arms around his waist. "For collapsing on my prairie," he said with a grin. "For being stubborn enough to strike out on your own, for saying yes, for choosing this life with me." Willa laughed. "When you put it that way, I suppose I should thank you for being in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, for carrying me to safety, for being patient while I figured out what I wanted, for loving me." "Always," Asher said seriously. "I will always love you, Willa. That is the easiest promise I have ever made." They kissed as the stars came out, the same stars that had watched over Willa that night she nearly died on the prairie, the same stars that now witnessed the beginning of her new life. The first year of marriage brought adjustments and challenges as Willa learned the full reality of ranch life. The work was hard and constant, from the early morning hours feeding chickens and collecting eggs to the late evening tasks of preserving food and mending clothes. She learned to cook for the ranch hands, to help with branding and birthing, to manage the household accounts and order supplies. There were moments of frustration when things went wrong, cattle got sick, or storms damaged property, but there were far more moments of joy. Waking up next to Asher every morning, his arm thrown over her waist. Working side by side with him during the day, their partnership growing stronger. The quiet evenings on the porch, talking about their day or reading together. The way he looked at her across the table at meals, like he still could not quite believe she was his. The nights in their bed when he showed her with his body what his words sometimes could not express. By the end of that first year, Willa knew with certainty that collapsing on that prairie had been the worst thing that could have happened to her. It had led her here to this life, to this man, to this happiness she had not known existed. The second year brought news that filled them both with excitement and terror. Willa was pregnant. She told Asher one evening after supper, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said simply, watching his face for his reaction. Asher's eyes went wide, his mouth opening and closing without sound for a moment. Then he let out a shout of pure joy, picking her up and spinning her just like he had the day she agreed to marry him. "Careful," Rosa shouted from the kitchen. "She is pregnant, you fool. I know." Asher shouted back, setting Willa down gently, his hands framing her face. "We are going to have a baby. Willa, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Asher said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You have given me everything, Willa, everything I never knew I needed." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, Willa blooming with health despite the morning sickness that plagued her first few months. Asher became impossibly protective, trying to stop her from doing any work, following her around anxiously whenever she moved. Rosa finally had to intervene, explaining firmly that pregnancy was not an illness and that Willa needed activity, not coddling. Catherine came to stay for the last month of the pregnancy and the weeks following the birth, her capable presence a comfort to them all. When Willa went into labor on a warm spring morning, Catherine and Rosa took charge, sending Asher and Miguel out to work the ranch while they attended to Willa. The labor was long and difficult, testing Willa's strength in ways she had not anticipated. But 14 hours after it began, she held her son in her arms, a squalling, red-faced bundle with a shock of dark hair in his father's eyes. Asher, summoned by an excited Maria, burst into the room and froze at the sight of his wife and child. "It is a boy," Willa said tiredly, smiling at his stunned expression. "We have a son." Asher approached slowly, as if afraid he might wake from a dream. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his large, work-roughened hands reaching out tentatively toward the baby. Willa placed their son in his arms and watched as her strong, capable husband looked down at his child with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Asher whispered. "Willa, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Asher's father, with the middle name James for Willa's father. Thomas Hawthorne came into the world healthy and loud, and he brought a joy to the ranch that Willa had not thought possible. Even the gruff ranch hands went soft around him, taking turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to earn his smiles. Life settled into a new rhythm built around Thomas's needs and the demands of the ranch. Willa learned to balance motherhood with her responsibilities, nursing Thomas while reviewing accounts, carrying him in a sling while she worked in the garden, singing to him while she cooked. Asher was a devoted father, spending every available moment with his son, teaching him things he was far too young to understand, but that Asher insisted he needed to know. "He is only 3 months old," Willa said one evening, watching Asher hold Thomas on his lap and describe the different types of cattle. "He does not need to know about livestock yet." "It is never too early to start his education," Asher said seriously, then grinned when Willa laughed at him. "Fine, maybe I am getting ahead of myself. But look at him, Willa. He is so alert, so bright. He is going to be something special." "He already is something special," Willa said, leaning against Asher's shoulder and looking down at their son. "He is ours." The years passed in a blur of happiness, punctuated by the normal challenges of frontier life. When Thomas was 2, Willa gave birth to their daughter, Emma, who came into the world with Willa's dark hair and a stubborn streak that made her parents laugh in recognition. 3 years later, another son arrived, Henry, calmer than his siblings but with a curiosity that got him into constant mischief. The ranch prospered under Asher's management, growing into one of the most successful operations in the territory. He hired more hands, built the larger barn he had dreamed of, and earned a reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher. Willa managed the household and the accounts, raised their children, and became known throughout the area as someone who could be counted on in times of trouble, always ready with a meal for a hungry traveler or advice for a struggling neighbor. Catherine visited regularly, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to the children. Rosa and Miguel remained integral parts of the family, aging gracefully as the years passed, but still insisting on pulling their weight. Maria eventually married one of the ranch hands and built a small house on the property, her own children growing up alongside the Hawthorne kids. On their 10th anniversary, Asher took Willa back to the spot where he had found her on the prairie. They rode out alone, leaving the children with Rosa for the day, and stood together looking at the endless grass stretching toward the horizon. "I think about that day sometimes," Willa said, leaning against Asher. "How close I came to dying right here. How different everything would be if you had not happened to be checking strays in this exact location. I think about it too, Asher admitted. I think about what my life would look like if I had not found you, if you had not agreed to stay at the ranch, if you had chosen deeming over me. He tightened his arms around her. It terrifies me sometimes how easily we could have missed each other entirely. But we did not miss each other, Willa said firmly. You found me. You saved me. And then I saved you right back by loving you. We found each other, Asher, against impossible odds. That is not luck, that is fate. I do not know if I believe in fate, Asher said, but I believe in us. I believe in what we have built together. This family, this life, this love, that is real. Willa turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had literally carried her to safety and then given her a reason to stay. His face was more lined now, weathered by sun and wind and the passage of time. There was silver threading through his hair, and his hands bore the scars of a decade of ranch work. But his eyes, those gray-green eyes, looked at her with the same love and wonder they had held on their wedding day. I love you, she said simply. I loved you from almost the first moment, even though I did not want to admit it. I love you more with every passing year. I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You will never have to, Asher promised. I am yours, Willa, for all the years we have left, for whatever comes next. I am completely and utterly yours. They kissed there on the prairie where their story had begun, the sun warm on their faces and the wind rustling the grass around them. In the distance, they could see the ranch buildings, the home they had built together, the legacy they were creating for their children. The ride back was leisurely, both of them savoring the rare time alone. As they approached the house, they could see the children playing in the yard, Thomas helping Miguel with some task while Emma and Henry chased chickens, their laughter carrying across the distance. Rosa stood on the porch watching over them, and she waved when she spotted Asher and Willa returning. "Mama! Papa!" Emma shrieked, running toward them as they dismounted. Henry followed close behind while Thomas, at 10 years old already conscious of his dignity, walked over more sedately. Asher scooped up Emma with one arm and Henry with the other, both children giggling as he spun them around. Willa put her arm around Thomas, who was getting too old for such displays but still leaned into her affection. "Did you have a good ride?" he asked seriously, his young face so like his father's that it made Willa's heart clench. "We did," Willa said. "We went to a very special place and talked about how lucky we are to have each other and to have all of you. Papa says you almost died before you met him," Thomas said with the bluntness of childhood. "He says he found you just in time." "That is true," Willa said. "I made some poor decisions and I got into trouble and your papa saved me. But the real miracle was not just that he found me. It was that we fell in love, that we built this life together, that we got you and Emma and Henry. Those are the true gifts." Thomas considered this with his characteristic seriousness. "I am glad he found you," he finally said. "Otherwise we would not be here." "Otherwise I would not be here either," Willa said, pulling him close. "Not really. Your papa did not just save my life that day, he gave me a reason to live it." That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Willa and Asher sat on the porch as they had done so many evenings over the years. The stars were bright overhead, and the air carried the cool promise of autumn. "You ever regret it?" Asher asked suddenly. "Giving up your plans for deeming? Your aunt, the life you might have had there?" Willa looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. Why would you ask that? I do not know. Sometimes I look at you working so hard, managing the house and the children and the accounts, and I wonder if you ever wish for an easier life. A town life with neighbors close by and shops and social opportunities. Asher Hawthorne, look at me." Willa waited until he met her eyes. I chose this life. I chose you. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. Because you are my home wherever we are. Could I have had a perfectly fine life in Deeming helping my aunt? Probably. Would I have been happy? Maybe, in a surface sort of way. But I would never have known this kind of happiness. This deep, bone-level contentment that comes from waking up every day with the person you love, building something meaningful together, watching your children grow. I would never have known what real love feels like. You gave me that, Asher. You gave me everything. Asher pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. You gave me everything too. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me live again. You made everything matter. They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms as the night deepened around them. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds. In the barn, the animals were settled for the night. Across the property, the ranch hands were in the bunkhouse, their own day's work done. Everything was peaceful. Everything was as it should be. Willa thought about the frightened, exhausted young woman who had collapsed on the prairie a decade ago, certain she was going to die alone. She thought about how Asher had appeared like a miracle, how his kindness had saved her in more ways than one. She thought about the choice she had made to stay, to give love a chance to build this life. It had been the right choice, the only choice. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Asher asked, his voice rumbling through his chest. "For finding me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for collapsing on my prairie," Asher said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Willa laughed softly, and they sat together under the stars, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious and eternal. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, the same prairie where she had nearly died, now a symbol of how far they had come and how much they had built together. In the years that followed, the ranch continued to thrive and grow. Thomas eventually took over much of the daily operation from his aging father, running things with the same integrity and skill Asher had taught him. Emma proved to have a head for business, managing the accounts and negotiating contracts with buyers across the territory. Henry discovered a talent for working with horses, breeding and training some of the finest stock in New Mexico. Asher and Willa watched their children grow and marry and start families of their own, filling the ranch with grandchildren who ran wild across the property, just as their parents had done. They grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces marking the passage of time, but their love never wavering. On their 50th anniversary, surrounded by 3 generations of family, Willa looked across the crowded room to where Asher sat holding their newest great-grandchild, a tiny girl named Willa after her great-grandmother. His face was lined with age now, his hands gnarled with arthritis, but when he looked up and caught her watching, his eyes held the same love they had held 50 years ago. He mouthed the words, "I love you," and she mouthed them back, her heart as full as it had been on their wedding day. That night, lying in bed in the room they had shared for half a century, Willa reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From that moment of collapse on the prairie to this moment of profound gratitude, her life had been an adventure she never could have anticipated. "What are you thinking about?" Asher asked, his arm around her shoulders as they lay in the darkness. "About that day you found me," Willa said. "About how terrified I was, about how I thought I was dying." "You almost did die," Asher said quietly. "Another hour or 2 in that sun and it would have been too late. But it was not too late. You came, you saved me, and then we had all of this." Willa gestured at the room, the house, the life they had built. 50 years, 3 children, 10 grandchildren, 5 great-grandchildren, and counting. A successful ranch, a good life, All because you were in the right place at the right time. All because you were stubborn enough to strike out on your own, Asher countered. All because you were brave enough to stay when you could have left. All because you chose me. I will always choose you, Willa said. In every lifetime, in every universe, I will always choose you. And I will always find you, Asher promised. Even if I have to search every inch of prairie in the territory, I will always find you. They fell asleep in each other's arms, just as they had done for 50 years, just as they would continue to do for whatever time they had left. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under the stars, witness to their love story, guardian of their happiness. When Willa finally passed away at the age of 86, surrounded by family and holding Asher's hand, her last words were, "Thank you for carrying me to safety." Asher, devastated by her loss but grateful for the life they had shared, held her hand long after she had gone, unwilling to let go of the woman who had changed everything. He followed her only 6 months later, his heart unable to beat without hers. They were buried side by side on the ranch they had built together, under the endless sky they had loved, their headstones bearing simple inscriptions. She chose love, and he chose her. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to mourn them, but also to celebrate them, to honor the extraordinary love story that had begun with a collapse on the prairie, and a cowboy brave enough to carry a stranger to safety. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the legacy Asher and Willa had created. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the work was done and the stars came out, family members would gather on the porch and tell the story of how it all began, of the stagecoach robbery and the long walk and the collapse and the rescue and the love that changed everything. It became a legend on the ranch, passed down through the years, the story of Willa who collapsed from exhaustion on the prairie and Asher who carried her miles to safety. But those who told the story always made sure to emphasize the most important part, that the real miracle was not the rescue itself, but what came after. The choice to stay, the decision to love, the courage to build a life together despite the uncertainty and challenges of the frontier. Because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the dramatic beginning, but the quiet, steady, powerful love that sustained them through 50 years of marriage, that created a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. That was the true story, the one worth remembering, the one that proved love could flourish even in the harsh landscape of the frontier, could take root and grow and spread like the prairie grass itself, endless and enduring and beautiful. And somewhere in the vast expanse of that New Mexico prairie, the place where Willa had collapsed and Asher had found her remained unchanged, the grass still growing, the sun still beating down, the wind still blowing. But it was no longer just a random spot on an endless plain. It was sacred ground, the birthplace of a love story that would be told and retold for as long as the ranch stood, for as long as the prairie stretched toward the horizon, for as long as there were people who believed in the power of love to transform a moment of desperation into a lifetime of happiness. The end of Asher and Willa's story was not an ending at all, but rather a continuation, their love living on in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their names and their legacy. The ranch they built together remained a testament to what could be achieved when two people chose to face the challenges of life side by side, when love was given the chance to flourish and grow. And every spring, when the prairie grass turned green and the wildflowers bloomed, the family would gather at that spot where it all began. They would stand together, multiple generations connected by blood and by story, and they would remember. They would remember the young woman who nearly died there. They would remember the cowboy who saved her. They would remember the love that grew from that desperate moment into something eternal, because that was the true magic of Asher and Willa's story. Not that he found her when she needed saving, though that was remarkable enough. Not that she chose to stay, though that took immense courage. The true magic was that they built something together that lasted, that endured, that became bigger than both of them. They created a family, a home, a legacy of love that would ripple forward through time, touching lives they would never meet, inspiring stories they would never hear. That was the gift they gave each other, and the gift they gave to all who came after them. The knowledge that love, real love, the kind worth fighting for and working for and choosing every day, that kind of love could conquer anything. Distance, hardship, fear, loss, even death itself could not diminish what they had built together. So the prairie remained, endless and eternal, holding its secrets and its stories. And among all the tales that landscape could tell, among all the dramas that had played out across its vast expanse, the story of Willa Morgan and Asher Hawthorne stood out as something special. A reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us exactly where we need to be. That sometimes being saved is just the beginning of the story, not the end. That sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected places and changes everything. Their story became part of the land itself, woven into the fabric of that place, as much a part of the prairie as the grass and the sky and the endless horizon. And in that way, Asher and Willa achieved a kind of immortality, their love story living on long after they were gone. A beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been lost and desperate and afraid. A promise that salvation might be just over the next rise, that love might be waiting just around the next bend. The prairie remembered them. The ranch remembered them. Their descendants remembered them. And in being remembered, in having their story told and retold, Asher and Willa lived on. Their love as endless and enduring as the prairie itself, stretching forward into eternity, a testament to the power of two hearts choosing to beat as one, of two lives choosing to become a single story worth telling.